Thanks very much for coming tonight. Such poor conditions. We were hoping to do a practical session for those that came last year with the Sanderson session. We're hoping to do a practical session with the under 15 Furlong Cup boys, with Dale taking the session. But we're also hoping to do a theory session inside. So we'll just skip straight to the theory part, seeing it's so dry outside. So thanks for your attendance tonight. We're really fortunate to have Dale Amos with us this evening. And for a lot of people in the room, Dale's experience really ticks a lot of the boxes. Been community footballer at a very high level, a coach at a community level at a very high level as well with South Barwon. 3 premierships in a row, right, South Barwon. Named in the top 50, team of the century with the Geelong Footy League, so very good football as well. VFL level with Geelong, and now in the AFL ranks with Carlton, and doing some great things with Carlton as an assistant coach working with defenders.
Yeah.
So feel free tonight to really ask questions and be involved, and I'm sure that's what Dale wants. The best sessions, coaching sessions, are where the audience really gets involved and owns the session as well. So we're in for a treat, so can we put our hands together for that?
I'd like to think my coaching career is a bit more solid than my playing career. It was my footy career started in St Arnaud, so country footy, I guess, in terms of my original background, and then had some time with South Barwon, VFL, AFL assistant, and now what I'm doing with Carlton. So I've been at Geelong for 7 years, coached the VFL for 3, got to do the opposition analysis for 12 months, and then coached the defence at Geelong for 3 years, and now in my first year at Carlton. So it's been an interesting transition from what I would consider an elite organisation in Geelong, who'd had obviously sustained success over a period of time, and we've been able to build that a little bit in my time at South Barwon, to now an element of building, I guess, at Carlton, which is a very different thing to what I've experienced before. So my sort of 6 months exposure to it has been really exciting. It's been great to see sort of everything I hoped it would be. I guess so far it's been challenging and rewarding, and there's a lot of cultural shifts we've made. There's a lot of standard shifts we've made, which is, I guess, what happens at a lot of footy clubs everywhere. So it's been great to go and experience that, having come from such a strong culture. I've put some stuff together in terms of planning a training session. What I think in terms of coaching philosophy is really what I think is critical. The things I've sort of built, I guess, over time, a combination of St Arnaud, South Barwon, Geelong, and now my time at Carlton. It's evolved over that period of time and exposed to all the different areas. So I've got a little bit of that, but really what I wanted to do as much as anything is throw it open and have it be tailored to what you guys need. I feel like I've got a pretty good handle, having worked at local level. I feel like I'm more handle on the things that are important to coaches, both junior and senior at local level. I've got a reasonable handle on it, but I guess there's an opportunity for you guys to drive it a little bit as well. There's no point me telling you stuff that's not that relevant for what you guys are doing. So the projector's not going to work with my computer, but I'll run through the few things I had. I think it's really important to identify that the coach you are will be impacted by the player you were. So typically, if you were a hard-nosed, in and under defender, what are the players you'd be drawn to, do you reckon, when you start to coach? Those type of players, the ones that go and win their own footy. It's really, I think it's important to identify that is part of what will make you a coach, but also be open and prepared enough to identify that, particularly with kids, that there's going to be all different types, and there is in senior footy as well. So you look at a side like Hawthorn, for example, we think of them as a brilliant contested side, particularly on the big stage. They've been able to win flags the last few years. Guys like Bradley Hill and Isaac Smith, who are very outside players, are as critical to that team, and some would say even more, than Luke Hodge and Jordan Lewis and Sean Burgoyne, who are all really contested players. So it happens from junior level all the way through. So particularly junior level players, the key is to be able to give them the tools to be able to do everything they need to be able to do. So it doesn't mean they're going to be all brave, but it is important that you teach them the way to be able to do all those things safely, and then they'll be able to implement it when they take it through their footy career. A lot of poor coaching happens off the back of coaches saying, we won't go and win hard footy, for example, in terms of contested ball. Well, have you taken the time to teach them how to win contested ball? So we'll talk a little bit about that, what that looks like and how you can do that, and it's really critical both at senior level and junior level. One of the things that would probably surprise everybody in the room if they came and spent some time in an AFL environment is the amount of fundamental stuff that gets coached. So by fundamental stuff, I talk about someone like a Jacob Wedding, who's the #1 draft pick. He's going to be a very, very good player. He's already a pretty solid player, 80% marks on the weekend. We talk about where he stands on his opponent when the ball comes in. Where is the dangerous space? Is it the left side, right side? Should be in front? Should he be behind? Fundamental stuff, just basic stuff. It's not as complicated as you might think. We talk about body positioning. We talk about follow through on kicks. Just really basic fundamental stuff. And it gets missed a lot. So again, we'll go through some stuff, and hopefully I can give you some cues and some things to look for there in being able to teach the fundamental stuff. One of the things that I really battled with when I was a coach was I wasn't a great kick. So then how do you go about teaching someone else to be able to kick the footy if you're not a great kick yourself? So hopefully I can give you a few tools that you can use to be able to go through teaching some of that stuff. In terms of the room, what have we got? Who's a junior coach? And who's a senior coach? So it's about 50-50. Really important in terms of the conversations we have and the stuff that I'll talk about. Try not to think, well, this doesn't apply to me because this is just about junior footy, or this doesn't apply to me because this is just about senior footy. It will apply to everybody, and I'll try and carry it through so that it stays as consistent as we can. Particularly with young players, and even with senior teams, what do you guys think about structuring game plan? How important is it? How big a component is it of your training and your preparation? What do you guys think? It's a pure question.
So if I was to say how I do that to my junior guys, so I deal with under 12 team. We're quite a lot of first year players.
Yep.
So for me, and tends to become quite simple.
Yep.
Because if you try to throw too much at first year players,
Yep.
you're not going to get it.
Yep.
So try to keep it fairly
So
simple.
what type of stuff? What are we talking about? What if you talk about game plan?
So I try to break it down into the 3 sort of zones throughout the round. So if I've got a defender, all I've basically said to them is stand beside your man.
Yep.
And just basically your whole role is just to stop him from getting the ball.
Yep.
Okay. A midfielder is things like pushing back into back line to help out,
Yep.
but not pushing forward into the forward line and working hard obviously in the middle.
Yep.
And as a forward, it's about creating that space, leading out to the ball to take the mark.
Good, pretty good principles in terms of junior footy. It's important probably that we don't get too caught up in structure and game plan. Again, I'll try and give you some tools which will be able to expand on that, and even I reckon at a really young age. My oldest son Jack played under 10s last year, so I got the pleasure I co-coached with one of the other fathers in under 10s. It was, to be honest, it was the most challenging year I've ever had. It was unbelievable. It was challenging, not so much because of the kids, it was challenging because it really tested me as a coach. So when we started talking about teaching kicking, for examples, I had to really strip it back and think about the best way to go about teaching it. So for Jack, for example, he was really struggling hitting his toe. He was hitting his toe all the time when he was kicking the ball. So in things like the ball drops, all those sort of things happen. So we stripped it back and started talking about the feel on his laces. It needs to hit his laces. So just little cues and things like that. Junior coaching is brilliant. It's so much fun and so rewarding in terms of what you get out of it. But it does really challenge you, because the easy thing to say is this kid doesn't get it, or I'm not going to be able to teach him, or and I'll go through it a little bit later, we taught them how to do run and carry at under 10. But it was a process to build it up from the really basic level to where we needed them to go to. So again, I'll just talk about progression and what it looks like. And we'll talk about it at the most basic level, so under 10s, but that will apply to everything you do. So all your drills, and I'll talk about how you go about progressing your drills and how important it is you know, even for the guys who are coaching senior sides, the range and skill levels will be like this, and capabilities. So, you don't want to not challenge these guys who are up here, so you've got to be able to progress enough to be able to challenge them, but you don't want to leave these guys behind, and there's a way to be able to do both of those things, I reckon, in terms of coaching and how you go about it, right? So we'll talk about all those sort of things a little bit as well. Again, I'm just trying to give you a bit of an indication of what I'm going to cover, and then I'll give you a bit of an idea whether I'm hitting the mark and you guys are getting what you need to out of it. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
How long are we sitting on?
Go to the dongle.
okay, there we go. Yeah, right. Extra bonus.
My name is Jack Wally. You got my name in the pocket?
I should set this up a little.
Okay. Alright. So this next bit I'll talk about is more in relation to junior footy, but it applies to. I reckon it applies to a lot of senior footy as well, particularly if you talk about younger players coming through. Why is it important to play in different positions, give them exposure to play different roles? Give me some reasons. I reckon there's about half a dozen.
We understand that forward plays far different to backline play.
Yeah, so they potentially will be exposed to different areas, and they are very, very different. Yep. What else?
Defense, offense.
Yep. What else?
Give them the confidence to be able to play.
Yep. So give them the skill. We'll talk about the skill set to be able to play in a range of different positions. That's certainly one of the ones. And even as a senior coach, you'll require that. You know, every AFL team now needs players who've got great flexibility and can play in a variety of different roles. Yep. What else?
Kids transform into totally different players as they grow up and bigger and play different roles.
What happens to the tallest kid in junior footy? Where does he play?
Right.
How many guys have you seen at junior level who were the tallest kid and then stop growing? And then all of a sudden, all they've ever done is play in the ruck. What do they do then? So they should be able to play forward and back. They should be able to play a whole range. So the development is a really important one. What else? Think about players' experience.
Skill set and mindset.
Yeah, skill set and mindset. Expand on what you mean.
If you've been playing 40 careers and forward, you're throwing playing deep into the back half or a tag or something along those lines.
Yep.
And you've learned different skills to be able to
Absolutely.
run somebody in the middle, have the mindset to be able to challenge yourself to be able to run a good mark.
Yep.
Or play on really good forward.
Yep.
You could always play
Yep.
forward. This is something that you might be matched up on.
Perfect. Two other really big reasons I reckon which are really critical.
So you take the skills you learn in one role apply totally. So like defensive pressure as a forward
Yep.
comes from understanding.
No doubt. Two really big ones. Think about junior footy
Enjoyment
in particular. Enjoyment. Where do you touch the ball the most?
on the bill.
In the midfield. So, not that it's all about winning the footy, but how much of it is you experienced in hands by actually getting your hands on the footy, right? So, if you can't put your least talented kids all on the ball at the same time because you're setting them up to fail. But how can you do it? Well, how can you do it in a senior perspective if you want to expose someone to playing on the ball and they haven't played on the ball before?
Leaders, space, having a couple of strong long balls in there.
So put them with two good kids or two of your leaders who put your 18-year-old kid on with two of your leaders in your midfield and give them a chance to have some success and learn off the players who are in there. Well, it's a really important one. What about if the kids that go on, or players that go on to play high-level footy? What happens then? When they get to a squad, there's a squad out here, where have 80% of the players played? Midfield. So what do they do then? Where do they all have to play in the rep side? They might have to play as a deep defender. They might have to play deep forward. They might end up playing in the ruck. Okay, so if they haven't had exposure to that, you're actually doing them a disservice, even for your talented kids. So if you look at both ends of the spectrum, your least talented players versus your most talented players, you're actually doing them both a disservice, right? If you don't expose them to opportunities to be able to play in a range of different positions. Right, so again, it applies to both senior and junior. encourage your players. I'll talk a little bit more about that. What I mean by that in terms of, this is games a little more so than training. But what I mean by look for the teachable moments. What does that look like?
So you pick a situation that's just happened,
Yep.
which you can then elaborate on to either correct either a skill efficiency or whether it's positional or whatever it is. You
Yep.
pick a point one there and then you can talk about that as opposed to a theory. So it's a practical example.
Yep. Yeah. So the easy thing to do as a coach is to look at the mistakes and see them purely as mistakes rather than opportunities for you to be able to teach a team. Right, and it might be individual, it could be the team. It doesn't really matter, to be honest. But look for those opportunities as a coach where you know that that instance is going to be an opportunity for you to upskill your players through education. Right, so again, the easy thing to do as a coach is to see it as a frustration or something they're not doing. Look for those teachable moments both in training and in games where you can upskill your players and your team. Right, you'll see them all the time. You'll see them all the time, and they'll either frustrate you or you'll see them as opportunities to be able to upskill your players and obviously yourself as well. Why have I put that in there? Well, what does it do if we do that as coaches?
It's a bad example.
Bad example, why? Yeah, we condone it, don't we, if we do that? Our players will mimic our behaviour. How many of you guys remember your junior coaches? Yeah, put your hands up if you remember your junior coach. All right. You guys, at times, I reckon you think you maybe don't have too much influence over your players. You have enormous influence and you'll have a huge impact over. They will idolise you, they'll look up to you, and they'll look at you for examples of guidance. Right? This is a huge one. Make sure you don't abuse umpires. Right? We need to set a solid example in that. And that goes for your overall demeanour, I reckon.
I reckon if you're focusing on the umpiring, you're losing the reason why you're there.
Yeah.
You're there for the team, you're there to teach them.
Absolutely.
So if
Absolutely.
you're umpire, you just lost.
Absolutely. And that goes into the next one. Don't make it about you. Right? This happens a lot in junior sport where the approach of the coach, or you go in with a really clear mindset that we're going to coach the players and they're going to have fun until it comes to the time when we need to win, doesn't it? That attitude happens all the time. All the time. So this theory we talked about before about the players and giving them exposure to different positions on the ground. What happens when the game gets tight? If I let my ego coach, what happens then? What do? I move them. What do I do then? I put all my best kids around the ball. I give us all the best chance to be able to win. That is okay on occasion. But don't let your ego impact the way you coach. Almost my most enjoyable time as a coach was when I coached the VFL, and in essence, being at Geelong, the results were part of the process, but they weren't the thing that were driving us. So it gave us a chance to be able to look for all those things in between, look for all those opportunities where we could be better as a group. I could teach the players, and we could expose them to new experiences and make them better, us better as a team and then better as players, with the result being a byproduct of what we did as opposed to sole focus. So anytime all you're thinking about is winning, particularly with junior footy, I reckon you're doing your players a disservice. Okay, so leave your ego at the door and don't allow it to affect the way you coach. Right, we'll just a couple more. This is a little bit about training. We've already touched on the teaching your players how to play safely. We'll go into organising a training session in a sec, but this is a really big component of it, being organised and make training engaging. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. Allow your players to make mistakes we've already touched on. Teach them all aspects of the game we've already touched on. And communicate and educate your players. My approach to it would be very different to what it was. And that's not necessarily to say it was really, really poor at the time. I've just evolved and changed, and my philosophies on this have changed a little bit. Right. Talk to me about what you need before the session. What do you need to do before the session starts?
Plan out your drills.
Plan out your drills. Right. Really, really important. Yep. What else?
Focus what you want to get out of the session.
Yep. Perfect. So session and also, I reckon, by extension of that, that individual drills you're doing. So again, we'll talk about that a little bit. You can make the mistake of trying to do a drill that covers everything. So I reckon it's really critical you have a really clear outcome in terms of what you're trying to achieve, what you're trying to coach in the drill. Right? It's an important component to making sure you're really organised. Right. If I went to every local ground in the region and I got there right at the start, what would it look like? Talk to me.
Barrels. 50.
Huh? Barrels from 50. So just before training, what am I saying?
Standing around.
Standing around, maybe a bit of kick to kick from 10 metres apart. Yeah. Then what's the very first thing every side in the region does?
Couple of mistakes.
Right. So I'm going to get you guys to guarantee me that every coach in the room, the next time we run a training session, there's no more than 2 laps. All right? I saw it at junior when I was coaching Jack in the under-10s, like I said before. Do you know what a lot of time it is? It's time for the coach to be able to get his shit together and work out what he's going to do first. All right? Does everyone agree that at some of the time, not all the time, but a lot of the time it is. It's just time for you to be able to get your shit together and know exactly what you're going to do for the night. Okay, so I think players should be demand a little bit higher standards than that, and I reckon we can be more creative than that. And I'll give you an example of what we did with the under-10. So typically it would start at 4:30. So the training session would be on at 4:30. At 4:30 there'd be half the kids would be around just kicking footies, wrestling on the ground, just doing normal kid stuff that you'd expect under-10s to do. There'd be kids sitting in cars, there'd be parents sitting in cars, there'd be cars slowly coming in, and by about 4:45 you'd probably have most of the kids there, right? Not dissimilar to probably most senior footy sides, you know, like 6 o'clock, there's a few guys there, you have a select few that are there at 5:30 and probably do a little bit extra. You have guys there at 6, you have a select few who turn up just on time, maybe just to miss the warm-up, maybe get a little bit of massage, come out to the main drills and then be done. Right, so we've all seen it before, that's local footy, I understand it all. We set up, so the very first thing, the first part of the warm-up was playing dodgeball with the kids. I tell you what, you should have seen the participation rate at 4:30 go through the roof. The amount of kids that were there just because we played a game at the start, got them engaged, made it a little bit of fun, it was getting them active. It wasn't just boring standing at the back of the line, it wasn't jogging 2 laps, it was just being engaged and doing something a little bit fun at the start of training. For junior footy, it is absolute gold. And I don't want to see every junior coach now go and do dodgeball for their first drill. But it gives you an idea. So if you've got access to PE teachers or you just be creative and think about the different types of games you can play with your kids. You can play soccer, you can do whatever you like. Make an activity at the start of training. If we step back and we talk about that time, say we'll talk about senior teams, but it could be for any team, between 5:30 and 6. Again, what do we say normally happens? Kicking barrels from 50. What waste of time? Does everyone agree? So if we talk about the breakdown between the amount of time you get to do a skill execution, now with closed skill, we'll say kicking, versus game style drills, you're probably talking maybe 50-50. Is that about what everyone does? In terms of your time, if we talk pretty basically, we're talking maybe 50-50. If you utilise that 30 minutes a little bit better, you get absolute quality out of what you're doing. And I reckon as coaches, you've got to help to facilitate that time a little bit. So how can we do that? How can we make that time more valuable than what it is at the moment?
Be organised.
Be organised. So what can you do?
We have drills set up.
Yeah, so like what? Give me some examples.
You don't start with short kicking, have that set up in one part, you go into some hands or
Yep.
competitive work, game style kind of stuff at the start, have that set up in another part of the ground.
Yep.
And start to unload as it goes that way.
So talk to me about the logistics. How do you make that run? You're only one senior coach.
You have your system out there.
Assistants, yeah? Who else?
We do something similar with Academy here, just have a warm-up card
Yep.
on the board, and that's the culture, they turn up, don't see who's doing that.
Yep.
All short roll balls,
Perfect.
so it's 150 touches for 4-6.
Who else can you use?
By seeing the players themselves having a
So what does every senior team have? Leadership day. Happens in the AFL, so I assume it happens everywhere else. Every side has a leadership group, don't they? Great opportunity to upskill some of your senior players who may be just craving the chance to be able to just grab hold of something and be exposed to maybe a bit more responsibility. Because typically, if you're in the leadership group but you're not the captain, what's your responsibility? I don't know, I'm not questioning it. But what do you do? What do they do? What role do they serve for footy clubs? What role should they serve for footy clubs? Help out, yeah. What else?
Behavioural leadership.
Yeah, absolutely. But I reckon as a senior coach, as the coach, you've got to facilitate that happening. So your job is to help to upskill their leadership. So if you want to become better leaders, show them how to do that and facilitate that happening. So I remember I was never an assistant coach before I ended up being a senior coach, but I got an opportunity just to take hold of the zone. And that was gold for me. You know, that was, in essence, that was my first exposure to being a coach. Because while I was still playing, I got exposure to taking control of that. That was my responsibility. That was the thing that I got to look after. So I made sure it stayed alive. You know, I brought it up and made sure we trained it where we needed to train it. I took control of it on game day. I made sure I gave feedback around what was happening. I tried to help to coach it a little bit. The same thing can happen with these sort of opportunities. Look for them everywhere where maybe you can upskill your leaders. Right? And junior footy, it might be just your older players, your more senior players, the ones that have been in your squad for 2 years. Maybe just give them a little bit of responsibility. Very, very rarely, if they're in positions of responsibility, which you've clearly put them, if you put them into a leadership group, very rarely will they let you down if you give them an opportunity to be able to take some small part of ownership over something. Right, so that 30 minutes before training, let's cash in. Right, let's cash in, make sure you make the most of it. Be organised, facilitate it for your players and make sure you get bang for your buck out of that time. Right, what will happen is your most committed players, they'll love that time because they'll feel like they're really upskilling themselves. And no two laps of death. All right, we're going to be more creative than that. Engage your players, make it fun, encourage them to be there on time. Right, it's a really good opportunity for you to be able to create a different feel about it. We'll talk about that a little bit after. What do you need? I think this might be the last one. What do you need to run a really effective training session? We've already talked about our plan, and we'll go through that a little bit more in detail in a minute.
Good equipment.
Yep, so talk to me about the equipment.
Well, you know what, footy's that are 3 or 4 years old.
Yeah, so that's preferable, no doubt. Air in your balls, all those sort of things, yeah.
And the water bottles all
Yeah.
done, you don't want to be doing that yourself.
Yeah, drink bottles, yep.
Bibs.
Bibs,
Yeah.
right, how many sides have got bibs? How many sides have got multiple colours in their bibs? How many sides have got bibs that stink? Everybody. All right, so I've got some bibs. We'll talk a little bit about it. If you can get say sets of 10, just different coloured bibs, it will facilitate your session so much more because you can have little groups going down, little grids, even just the efficiency of how your session works. And again, I'll talk about it a little bit in a minute. Just having maybe 3 teams of 10 instead of all over the shop, and some are mix and match. Try and be organised, and they're inexpensive. But I will say, if you get them, you've got to make sure you look after them because they typically rip relatively easy. So make sure, again, for me, this is a reflection of the coach. Are your bibs ripped? And what typically happens at the end of the night? You're trying to shitty like tonight. What happens to all the bibs? They get chucked in the bag, and then Thursday night, we grab them all out and go, ooh. Now they've been sitting in the bag for 2 days. Okay, so maybe it's just me. To be honest, I was pretty anal as a coach when I was coaching locally. Mum always fixed them for me, and I always washed them every night, every time we trained. So I'd take the footies home, let the air out of them, sit them on the clothes horse over the heater, make sure they were dry and ready to go for the next session. What else? We've got bibs, we've got balls, we've got our drink bottles. Cones. All right. Who's got multiple colours in their cones? Who's got their stack where they're all just chucked in on top of each other? Right. Okay. If you are a junior coach and you don't have 10 or 15 of multiple colours of cones, again, I think you're doing yourself a disservice. Because how can we use it, particularly with junior footy? We've got blue cones and we've got white cones. We're going to do a drill, some sort of drill. How can we help the kids by using the colours?
So what colours going to come from where?
Yeah, maybe. Think about a basic skill drill.
You get a skill focus for different zones, might be kicking from the blue or a handle from the white.
Perfect. Now we're talking. Everyone understand? It is a huge tool. What else does having multiple coloured cones allow you to be able to do?
So different drills up to work around.
So, again, if I reflect on my role as a senior coach at South Darwin, between drills, I'll be scrambling trying to set up the next drill, and all the coaches would be standing, all the players would be standing around waiting for me to get organised. You can set almost your whole night up probably if you want to. Right? It's not overly expensive. Again, it might reflect more on me, but I used to take them home and wash them. When the lights weren't great, I'd wash them so they were clean and everyone could see exactly what they were. When I put them back, always stacked in the colour. So when you go to grab them quickly in the training session, you've got them all there and your colours ready to go. Right, don't underestimate the attention to detail. So how long do you have your players for on a Thursday night? Hour? Hour and a half. Right, make the most of your time. We're getting the extra half an hour now, which we're cashing in. We're not wasting the first 15 minutes of our session because we're going to make it more engaging and more enjoyable. And now in that, the rest of the time that we're actually in with them, that extra hour, we're going to cash in. We're not going to have any downtime where we waste any time at all. Right? We're going to either use it as teaching time or time to train with real efficiency. Right? So inexpensive. The footies are, you got what you got a little bit. All I would say is make sure you look after what you do have. Okay? I guarantee your president will like you a lot more if you look after the footies and make it last as long as you possibly can. So just try and look after those, but the other things, I reckon they're relatively inexpensive. If you look after them, they'll last a long time. Okay, it will help you with your training session. Last one, and this is aimed particularly junior training sessions. Well, there's one other resource that I reckon gets underutilised at junior training.
Dads?
Parents. Right, so we go to this has happened at under 10s. You turn up and there was a hill along the side of the oval and there'd be 25 cars there and there'd be mums and dads and they'd all sit in there and they'd watch the training session. At the end of the session, whoever was the team manager would have some announcements and they'd come from everywhere because they need to know the information for the game of the weekend. All right? Is it their fault, do you reckon? How intimidating is it if you're a mum or a dad who haven't been exposed to footy, or even if it's a team that you haven't really been involved in for that long? How intimidating is it if your son's out in the training just to walk down and offer up to be able to help out? It's pretty tough, I reckon. Even for me, like I know when the year before when Jack started to play, it was like, I kind of don't want to step on anyone's toes here. You know, I don't feel like I'm overstepping the boundaries or going down there to offer up to help.
Especially when you're new to the area too.
That's right. So all those things are a part of it. But you can engage your parents. So we had mums who would come and could you come and help us out? We'd love you to be able to help out. All we need you to do is at the back of the line when the players come through, all you need to do is just throw them an extra ball. Fantastic. All it's going to do is it's going to increase your kid's experience and enjoyment of the training session. Because he might touch it another 40 or 50 times in the training session just because 3 or 4 of the mums or dads come and help out. A lot of times it's the mums. So it's your role to be able to help them to understand what they need to do and understand that it doesn't matter whether you don't know anything about footy. It has zero impact. You can get them to run drills where you say, this is what the drill is. So we're going to do a kicking drill here. All I want you to concentrate on in terms of the feedback for the players is look for follow through. So when they kick, we just want them to take one step afterwards. Do you reckon every mum or dad who's got a kid playing junior footy can do that? Absolutely. So give them, again, we talked about with the leaders, give them the guidance and give them the tools to be able to do what you're kind of asking them to do. But you've got to give them the green light to get involved and be exposed to it. Okay, it's a really important part of it. Because it is intimidating. Well, we shouldn't underestimate that. And once you get them in once and they feel like they're part of it, we used to, at the end of the session, we'd always have a competition kicking into the bin. And the kids, I'll tell you, it was the favourite part of the session. They loved it, right? But you get some of the mums and dads involved in the kicking comps, they love it as well. right? Why do we love footy so much? What do we love it? Camaraderie. It's a pretty good game. And if you think back to particularly when you were a young player, you know, whether you're playing, starting out your senior career or you're playing junior footy, you just bloody loved it, you know? You loved turning, you loved everything about it. Our job is to make it fun and make them love it even more. So there's kids who come through who their experience early on, either in senior footy or junior footy, will shape their love for the game. So your job, our job, is to make sure they love it as much as we possibly can. And what's a reflection of if they really love it? How do we know they really love it? They turn up the next week and then they turn up the next year. If they come back to play, you're doing your job. We had a kid, again, we'll talk about the under 10s because it's a reference point for me, something I know. I saw him at training and I just didn't think he liked it, I didn't think he wanted to be there. We kept him engaged. He kicked 2 goals by the end of the year, which was unbelievable. It was unbelievable. I didn't think it was possible. I would have been happy if he got 2 kicks for the year. But the sheer joy out of him being able to kick 2 goals, it's such a rewarding job, particularly junior footy, but all modes of footy. You've got to take great satisfaction out of that, and that essentially is your job. That's what your job is as a coach. That's where you get the greatest kid, right? In terms of the pure PowerPoint presentation, that's the stuff I had. What I was envisaging was that we would do a little bit of planning the training session, what that looks like, ways to be able to run your session, but also look a little bit of skill acquisition stuff, so how to teach some of the fundamental things. So if you guys have got specific things that you struggle with, hopefully I can help you with some of the fundamental stuff. But also look at that drill progression. I talked about the under 10s and the run and carry before, being able to teach run and carry. I'll give you a snapshot of what that looked like, how we progress that through, but then we'll also look at being able to progress other drills, you know, from a really basic level, and hopefully I'll give you a reasonable formula how you can go about doing that. When Chris Scott first came to Geelong, we scrapped every drill we'd ever done before and started again. So we just had a brainstorming session where we just created new drills. And it's a lot of fun. If you actually strip it back and you think about the process, again, we talk about training sessions and the outcome, what we want to achieve. If you do that for drills as well, where you say, what's the outcome, what's the thing we want to achieve in this drill? Let's go back to the start and work out how we go about doing that. How are we going to teach it? What does the drill look like? What does it look like in its most basic form? And then how do we progress it through?
Were the players inclusive of that as well, or was that just...
No, the coaches were part of that process, but what happens is your players will give you feedback around what works and what doesn't work. And when we talked about, don't be afraid of mistakes. If you do a drill that doesn't work, that's okay. Doesn't matter really. Just scrap it, and there might be a part of it you really like. You might review it and say, well, it didn't quite work, but if we did this, I reckon it'd be a great drill for us to be able to do. It gets you thinking really creatively, and what it'll do, it'll challenge you to think about the game and the way you want to coach the game, and the things that you think are really important. I think it's a good way to develop your coaching philosophy, because the easy thing for me to do tonight is say, well, this is what we do at Carlton, this is what we did at Geelong, and you all take it away and you mimic it. But I think my job is to challenge you guys to think about the way you see footy and try and give you some tools that help you to be able to, one, with your training sessions and your drill development, give you the tools to be able to do that a little bit better maybe than what you could before, but stimulate you to think about it. And then by extension of that, that'll extend into the game. How do you view the game? What do you think is important? Because even at you look at AFL footy and talk about, give me a side that you know has a really distinct style or plays a certain way. Bulldogs, how do they play? Hard and fast. What does it look like? Great. Yeah, but strip it back. Yeah. You're a Bulldog supporter?
No.
It is. It's bloody exciting. But what does it look like? Well, if you go to the footy and you see the Bulldogs, talk from a more technical point of view, what does it look like?
Take it on.
So play on? Yeah. What else?
They know what they've got to do. Each place needs to know what.
Yes, so there's a really clear system in place, but what does the system look like?
Chaos.
Yeah.
Contested ball.
They're huge on contested ball, so they're very good on contested ball. What happens when they win the contested ball?
They run 2
They spread, they've got numbers, they've got players in multiple options. So there's a really clear, distinct style and method to the way that they play. Give me a different style. So a side that plays different to the Bulldogs.
I saw the Sydney Swans early in the year, and I just thought they were amazing the way they structured up around the ground. They just seem to have an incredible understanding of where they should be in every instance.
So what's different about Sydney in particular compared to every other side of the competition? How do they defend? How do they defend? Defence only.
Keep going back.
No, defence.
Are they man on?
Yeah, they play man on man. Hard man on man. Hard man on man. What does every other? What do the West Coast Eagles do? Team defence, press. So there's 1,000 different formulas to how you can actually coach your footy team to play. Part of it is personnel. Part of it is your own philosophy on what you think is really important. Again, hopefully I can give you some tools to be able to at least stimulate you to think about that. You know what that might look like. You know, it's been fascinating for me. I've come from Geelong and moved to Carlton. We've got the senior coaches from Hawthorn. We've got an assistant coach from North Melbourne. We've got an assistant coach from Carlton. We've got an assistant coach from Richmond. We've got a VFL coach who's come from the Gold Coast. So we've got a pretty big melting pot of different ideas, and it's fascinating to talk about the way the teams have prepared them to play, you know, the way they're trained and prepared, but also their philosophies on the game. So again, hopefully I can stimulate you to think about that. Is there anything else specific that I can help you guys with?
I don't really struggle to teach kids to win their own footy.
Yep.
Is there a technique? You don't want to get their confidence, you don't want to say you're weak into that.
Yep.
How do you go?
We'll talk a little bit about I'll talk a bit about contested ball and the fundamental stuff with contested ball, what I think is important. One of the important things about progression, and I use the tackling analogy a lot, because if we were to make an under 10 kid do one-on-one tackling to come in. So we just said, we're going to do this in training, and he comes in and he tackles, and he whacks his lip on the other, the guy that he tries to tackle because his technique's poor. How do you reckon his tackling technique is going to be, and his willingness to want to do that from that point on? Not great, I'm going to get on. It wouldn't be great for me, I'd be shitting myself next time. So I reckon there's a really clear progression, particularly with anything contested, because you talk about kids, but even at senior level, you get guys, you'll get kids who come in who you'll see as have deficiencies in their game. Sometimes you'll improve them to a point, other times you'll be able to make huge inroads, but your job is to make sure you give them the tools to be able to do it the best they possibly can. Right? So you won't have all Joel Selwards, right? But you might be able to improve it to a level where you watch him in a game and you go, shit, I've never seen him do that before. But it'll be being able to give him the tools to be able to execute it properly. So I'll take you through a little bit of that stuff as well. Is there anything else?
One is run and carry.
Yep.
Is kids to be able to know when to go.
Yep. I'll teach you the genius of what we did with the under 10s. All right. So. No, I'll give you some principles and what it will do, and it will show you the progression and what it looks like. So it's it's less complicated than maybe what you think, but you can give the important. So the critical thing in terms of your drill design and being able to teach something is understanding what. What is it? What do you need to understand to be able to teach your players?
What are you trying to achieve?
Yeah, what you're trying to achieve. What else?
How do they think?
Yeah. I'm not sure I can do that. What are you trying to achieve? Yeah. How are you going to? You've got to understand the why and the how is really important. So, my first exposure when I first started at Geelong we'll talk about run and carry, it was exactly that, which I'd never really understood how to teach. We filmed training and we filmed it all the time. So my first 6 months essentially was watching training back and working out why things worked and why they didn't work, and you pick up some bits and pieces, but they deliberately didn't teach me exactly how to go about teaching it. I had to find it out for myself a little bit. So anytime you get the opportunity to go to the footy, the understanding the why is as important as anything. If you understand the why, by extension of that, then you can teach the how you go about doing it. So, yeah, I think I'll be able to help you a little bit with that stuff. We'll talk about the progression and what that looks like at the most basic level. And don't underestimate that some of the drills that we were doing early days with the under-10s, I've seen done, and I've done with senior sides. So, again, have an open mind to everything we do, and it's easy to say, well, that doesn't apply to me, that's a junior thing. Make sure you think about where it might apply to you, because I guarantee you, you'll have some guys that aren't great run and carry in your senior side if you coach senior footy, or you'll have some guys who aren't great kicks at senior footy. So this is an opportunity to be able to maybe upskill with some of that.
Team defence?
Yep, I'll teach you some principles. We were talking about man-on-man in terms of the defence before. I'll teach you, I'll talk about some principles in terms of defence of, this is my 4th year coaching defence. And I'll talk about some principles that I think, whether you play a team defence or whether you play a man-on-man defence, that apply no matter what. Okay, so hopefully that'll be about positioning. So hopefully there'll be some stuff, and I'll give you a few little drills that you can do with your players. So what will happen, instinctively your best players will typically play this way because they just get it. But it'll allow you, again, if we understand the how, we can actually go about teaching the players, and we can teach the guys who have the least skill or the smallest skill set through to the guys who know exactly what they're doing, and they'll be able to coach each other. Yep, anything else?
Just how to connect with certain players who aren't quite connected with what you're perhaps trying to teach them. So it might be a particular drill or whatever it is, and they're not quite switched on or interested. How you can try to connect with some of those individuals, because there are different individual strategies trying to.
Yeah, so I'll talk a little bit about that, which I think is really important in terms of the training and the way you structure your training session, and the things I think, particularly with kids, are critical for training. We'll talk about that a little bit more as well.
I sort of just, I don't know whether it's covered in the other things you're talking about, but that notion of controlling the ball, when it's time to be slow and steady versus the transitioning into, oh, we've got to score.
Yep. We do so if you talk about it from an AFL perspective, we do a stack of scenario training where you go through and you have the time to do that. A lot of, talk about local footy, the restrictions will often be around time and whether you have time to do that. But I'll talk to you about it a little bit, because it's something that I think if you want to do it effectively as a senior coach at local level, you should invest in it in pre-season, because it's very difficult when you have it maybe for 2 hours during the week to start implementing new ideas. So some of the stuff we'll talk about tonight, I'm hoping you guys can take away, and your next training session you'll start to be able to implement. Other things, I reckon, you'll just put in the memory bank and you'll say, right, for next pre-season, this is what it's going to look like for us. And that'll stimulate you for you to be able to do that. So that'll be one of those, I reckon. It doesn't mean you can't teach it, but there's an element of time that you need to invest in being able to do those things. And again, you just got to have a really clear strategy with how you're going to go about doing it. There's not a right and a wrong way, but I'll give you a few cues as to what you might be able to do.
Method of stoppages.
Yep.
So that method to win the footy and different options for each player. Like you watch Paddy Cripps, he goes down compared to others. We can talk about that for sure. Yeah, again, there's a philosophical as a coach component to the stoppages in terms of what you want and how you're going to go about doing it. So there's a whole multitude of ways. Essentially, in terms of the structure, footy is numbers and space. You want 6 forwards, or you want 5 forwards, send next to one with stoppage. What are you going to do with your wingers? Does one sit behind? Does one sit lateral? Do they both sit out? And they both go in? There's a whole range of different choices you make in terms of what you think is the right structure for you. So, but there's some technique stuff we can talk about for sure. We should be finished about 12:30.
Watched the Brendan documentary.
Yes.
And like how he studied before pre-coaching with PFL, how he went overseas and he studied about how to develop personality with people and how to transfer a message across and learning all about different personalities. Do you find that like a vital part of senior coaching, like compared to what you've experienced from local footy to AFL?
I
I feel like now I'm more well equipped to be able to do it better, particularly in the first 6 months I've had at Carlton, because Bolts is the best I've seen by far, and by extension of him being the best, we've invested a lot of time in how we teach and our connection with the players. In saying that, I was invested in the players at local level as what I am now. You still spend a fair bit of time together at local footy. You think about it, between your maybe 3 hours of training, they might stay for a meal on a Thursday night, you spend a fair bit of Saturday together, you do spend a lot of time together, so by virtue of that you do become pretty invested in your players, but it's become a bigger component of what I do now, maybe just because of the skill set a little bit and the exposure I've had in the last 6 months, no doubt. So that connection is really important. So one thing Bolts talks a lot about is the being a participant rather than being a recipient. I think you might have said it in the doco, which, what do you guys think it means? What does he mean when he talks about
Does
that?
he put the boots on and get out there and speak to the guys? And
Yeah, well, he does do that,
yeah.
but he's talking to the players directly in terms of that.
So you actually invest in the whole process rather than just sit back and receive the information. You actually invest in being a part of it.
So we'll get a bit of a snapshot of how well that works tonight, because the easy thing to do when you come to a night like tonight is sit down and write notes and not be actively involved at all, really. You're just taking notes and all you're doing is you're copying the conversation I have. What I'm trying to get you to do is stimulate you to think about and challenge you with some questions and some ideas, so that you actually are more well equipped when you walk away from here, rather than just having a book with some notes in it. And it happens when I'll ask some questions and we'll do some things down here. And how actively involved do you want to be? You know, how much, because does it matter if you get it wrong? If you put your hand up and you say, this is what I think, and it's not correct, does it really matter? In some ways, you probably become more invested in what the outcome might be or what the answer might be on the back of it. So that's what he talks about with the players and their investment in what we're doing and our meetings and everything. So yeah, it's a really engaging program. That's a big part of it. So yeah, we'll get to see a bit of a snapshot tonight, see whether it works and whether it doesn't work. See how many participants we've got in the room.